So who is it? Yeah, help me.
Living in France.
Are you help me identify the presenters.
Compulsory for one person.
Yeah, it's 15 minutes if you'd like to split it. That's fine.
Perfectly fine. You can start and then I'll sort of.
And tell me your name is.
I am Dr. Niti Basi. She is Vandana.
Okay, I have both your names. Looking for Dr. Porwal. You are.
Are we starting or are we going to wait for the speaker to
I think we'll start as soon as the session.
I've done it any way around.
I've not seen heard that person.
I like this. Jeremiah Madrid Indian. Living in the restaurant. He studied it. He studied business administration and then he started his business or his restaurant.
He'll do an introduction.
Means I would request everyone to keep their cell phones on silent mode, please. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Gagan Arora and I welcome you all to the Concurrent Session 3. The topic for the discussion today is cross-border strategies and sustainable development. I consider it a great honor to welcome Professor David Griffith. Professor Griffith has earned his doctorate at the University of Texas at Austin. His research has been published in Marketing Letters, Journals of the Academy of Marketing Science, and Journals of Marketing Channels. He also serves as the United States Fulbright Award Selection Committee for New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. We have with us Professor S.K. Grover as our co-chair for the session from Shahid Bhagat Singh College, University of Delhi. I would now request Professor Grover to present a souvenir to Professor Griffith, please. Thank you, sir. I would now request Professor Griffith to please take over the session.
Thank you very much. Thank everybody for being here, and I especially want to thank the organizers of the conference for setting up this program with such a wonderful group of timely and interesting papers. Today's session will focus on cross-border strategies and sustainable development. So each of the papers will bring a different approach to the questions of how foreign money and foreign capital and foreign businesses affect sustainability through their strategic choices. So due to time constraints, we'll keep the presentations, try to keep them about 15 minutes per presentation. And I think what we'll do is keep all the questions until the very end so that we can keep things as close to on schedule as possible. And I've been told we have a total of 90 minutes from right now, I assume, so we'll try to stop. So I guess that would be at 4 o'clock. So we'll stop. And beginning with, I think, Ms. Vandana Jain. On push factors causing outward FDI from select Asian economies, is sustainability a concern? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before I begin my paper, I would like to express my sense of gratitude towards my supervisor, Dr. Niti Basi, and the head of the department, Professor Bhanumurthy, for their constructive suggestions towards making of this paper. Without their valuable suggestion, the paper would not have been possible. To begin with, how would I present my paper is, in the beginning, as I would tell you basically how the multinational corporations from developing nations have emerged at the international level. Primarily, it was the MNCs from developed countries that have occupied the attention of various economies as well as various organizations across the globe. But over a period of time, especially after 1990, what we observe is the sudden increase as well as remarkable presence of multinationals from developing nations. So that is the broad topic that me and my supervisor try to analyze through the paper, that how these multinational corporations or the emerging economies which were earlier the recipients of FDI over a period of time are able to come at the international level and emerge as the source of FDI to host of other countries. And from the perspective of the conference, we try to specifically look at the sustainability concerns of these multinationals while investing abroad, how much concerned they are about the environmental issues. So to begin with, as I have told you, there have been various multinationals, and primarily the theoretical literature talks about why a particular MNC tries to reinvest or relocate the production activities overseas. There have been various theories. So the firm preferred to go overseas and take its production activities there. There have been various theories, but the pioneering work that have been done by the researcher, he is known as Professor John Dunning, who has primarily given the phenomenon of OLI, that is ownership, location and internalization framework, where he tries to talk about what are the various factors that enables a firm to relocate the production to some other location. And as I told you earlier, we are specifically trying to analyze what are the various home country factors known as the push factors. There can be two kinds of factors, the pull factors located at the host country or the push factors located at the home country that can promote OFDI, that is the outward FDI. So we try to specifically look at the push factors. We quickly overlook the trends, how the multinationals from emerging economies, especially from the 10 economies of Southeast Asian region like India, Bangladesh, Thailand, Singapore and so on, have emerged at the international level. If we look at the contribution of the developing nations vis-a-vis the developed countries, what we observe at the three thresholds of 1990, 2000 and 2010, we can look at the respective percentage of their contribution in the world economy for the OFDI. Specifically, when we look at the developing countries, what we can observe is their contribution has gone from 7.5% in 1990 to 12.1% to further 18.6% in 2010. So what we observe is they have made a remarkable presence in terms of contributing towards the global OFDI flows. And if we further try to de-analyze the table, we can look at the further contribution in the developing countries made by the countries from Southeast and Southeast Asian regions. Even their contribution has gradually increased at the international level. Then more specifically, the countries, the 10 countries that we try to analyze, their OFDI stock at the 3 decades, at the end of 3 decades have again been analyzed. And in this table, what we can observe, the countries like China, Hong Kong, India, they have made a remarkable presence in terms of exponential growth of their OFDI stock. We can just look at the values in terms specifically for India. In 1990, the stock was 124 millions, which jumped to 1733 millions. And in 2010, that was 92,407. Further, as I told you in the beginning, these countries earlier were the recipients of FDI from the MNCs from developed world. But now what we observe, these have also emerged as the source of FDI to the other countries. So again, we specifically look at how much stock in terms of greenfield projects, that is the fresh investment they have made to the various nations. Again, we can observe remarkable presence has been made by most of them, but the maximum contribution among all of them has been given by India. We can look at the jump in the OFDI greenfield projects made by India during the period 2004 to 2011. Okay. More specifically, what are the various reasons that actually make a particular firm to choose other location? As I told you earlier, there has been various premier work done by a number of researchers, but the most promising and the one which has been the most comprehensive and celebrated is the one done by Professor John Dunning. His framework is known as the OLI framework, where he says ownership advantages, location advantages of the host country and internalization itself then interact together, pushes a firm to choose some other location over the domestic locations. And then there could be various motives for which a particular firm may choose to go overseas. It could be resource seeking, market seeking, asset seeking, or efficiency seeking. But as the multinationals have also emerged from developing nations, then the OLI framework per se remains insufficient in explaining that why these firms which were earlier recipients of FDI has become a source of FDI. To explain this phenomena, a new framework was developed which was given by Professor Matthews, known as LL, Linkages, Leverage and Learning, where they say despite not possessing too much firm-specific advantages like technology, capital or other resources, by having a linkages with the foreign partner or catering to larger markets, gradually the firms like them are able to come at the international level. Companies account for 90% of OFDI from the region. And the data sources have been taken from IMF, World Bank and UNCTAD. Okay, so basically the empirical method that we will try to develop is the least square dummy variable, where for the individual country differences we will be creating the dummy variables. We would also, in order to have the better explanatory power of the model and avoid the larger number of explanatory variables, we will be using principal component analysis to reduce down the number of explanatory variables. Now quickly I just discuss the various explanatory variables that we have taken for our purpose and the expected signs. We have taken GDP of the host home countries, and it is expected to positively influence the OFDI from a country. So is the GDP per capita. A larger GDP per capita indicates larger purchasing power in the hands of the people, and because of the surplus they can invest it elsewhere. So is the policy variable like FDI openness, that basically tells what kind of liberal policies do the home country maintain for themselves, which can promote the firms to go overseas. Then we have the next variable as trade openness. Trade openness again has been calculated as a sum of exports and imports divided by the GDP of the home country. Again, trade openness shows prior to making FDI investment what kind of trade activities a country has with the host country. A larger exporting or importing activity definitely tells larger information about the host nation, and hence there is a greater possibility to successfully carry out the overseas venture. Human capital, a skilled human capital is expected to positively influence the outward FDI, as more efficient people can again pull out a efficient overseas venture. Then we have technology. Again, the better R&D facilities at home can make the foreign venture a better opportunity to invest. Then specifically from the perspective of sustainability and environmental concerns, we have taken the three variables, which is emission of CO2, emission of CO2 per capita and the consumption of energy. These three variables have been analyzed from the perspective that how much sensitivity the developing nations MNEs have when they go for overseas investment. Primarily it was the prerogative of developed countries to be very concerned about the nation. Since they were industrialized much before the developing nations, they are the major pollutant countries. And because of strict environmental standards, they were relocating their production activities to other nations and buying the carbon credits. So whether this kind of phenomena has also sunk in the behavior and practices of developing nation MNCs is what we try to investigate through our paper. Now I would request my supervisor, Dr. Neeti Bhasin, to come forward and take the discussion.
So how much time to ask? 5 minutes. I'll try to be as precise. Well, this is the equation. She's already talked about the explanatory variable, so I'm not going to read it out. This is the kind of equation that we have sort of worked on. And as I'll straight away come to the results. Now the thing is, because we were dealing with so many explanatory variables, so we normally expect a problem of multicollinearity, and that is what we did find. So to overcome that, we applied the principal component analysis after we saw that there was a high correlation among explanatory variables. I would straight away actually come to the results of the principal component analysis. This is the rotated component matrix, so we were able to extract three factors. Now the first factor, if you look at, so the three variables extracted in this are GDP per capita, FDI openness and trade openness. We call this factor as an economic variables, economic environment. Then if we look at the second factor, the variables that have been extracted are GDP, technology and human capital. So we call this factor as production conditions. And finally, our variable of particular interest was the environmental part. So the third factor extracts CO2 emissions, in per capita CO2 emissions and energy level consumptions. So consequently, we were able to come up with these three factors. And then we ran the regression on these three factors using the factor loadings, which were given in the table we have I've just shown to you. A linear combination of variables was chosen and factors were constructed. So basically these are the results. We just have one table for the results, so I'll just focus on this. Now, for all the three factors, the coefficients, the estimated coefficients have turned out to be significant, which means economic environment, production conditions, and the third factor called environmental degradation, all are actually significant factors when it comes to, or significant push factors in outward FDI from the developing economies. Now, factor 1, so I'll just dwell a little bit upon that. We get a positive sign for the first factor, and it is highly significant. Now, the first factor was actually GDP per capita, FDI openness, and trade openness. So, what we are trying to then say is that if these three variables are increasing, FDI outflows are increasing. Now, as far as FDI and trade openness is concerned, we expected a positive sign, and we are getting a positive sign. As far as GDP per capita is concerned, traditionally, it has been considered to be related in a negative way to FDI outflows. Now, how we explain this positive relationship is that when per capita income rises, there is greater savings and there is a greater investable surplus. Now, in the absence of enough opportunities in the home country, this investable surplus goes abroad. So that is what explains that a rise in per capita income is actually leading to a rise in outward FDI, because we have excess surplus funds to be invested abroad. Then if we look at the second factor, we get a negative sign, which is significant at 5% level. Now the second factor was technology, human capital, and GDP. So interestingly, again, what it is saying is that as GDP of the home country rises, outward FDI falls. Now, this is a very basic interpretation of GDP. Most of the studies which have been done so far taking GDP, they believe that when GDP rises and you have a larger market to cater to, firms are able to develop specialization due to economies of scale, and hence they go abroad. But a negative sign here is actually indicating that we are looking at a very direct effect of GDP, which means similarly, again, as compared to most of these studies where human capital and technology have shown positive relationships with outward FDI, meaning to say that we've been able to develop a better technology and therefore we are more competitive to go abroad, we get a negative sign. Now, as far as technology is concerned, what it possibly could indicate is that if we are able to develop better technology at home, and if we have a large market to cater to, then particularly in the case of efficiency-seeking FDI, we do not see a reason to go abroad. I'll just speak a little bit about this. Efficiency-seeking FDI, normally in the case of developed countries, means that they're going to other developing countries in search of new sources of competitiveness, which could mean low-cost labor, low-cost skilled labor, for example. But in case of a developing country, the idea is very different. Like for India, we have a large skilled labor available, and that's if we have a low-cost skilled labor available, and if we are able to develop human capital, there is less incentive for us to go abroad. And the same applies to technology also. So therefore, what we get is a negative. We get a positive sign for the estimated coefficient, which is highly significant, which therefore means that greater the level of environmental degradation, greater is the level of outward FDI. Now, this is an interesting finding because conventionally, it has always been seen that the developed, as she said, the developed countries have been sensitive to pollution concerns and environmental degradation. So what we try to find out is, are the developing countries now becoming sensitive to environmental concerns or not? So this is what we...
In their own country.
Yeah, in their own country, yeah. So are they becoming sensitive? So are they relocating then to other countries to take care of their own levels of CO2 emissions or their own levels of consumption of non-renewable sources of energy? And as far as this is concerned, or as our results indicate, they are becoming sensitive to that now. So, and the rest is dummy variables which we have introduced to account for country differences, or most of them are turning out to be significant. So to say that there are significant individual country differences when we talk about it. And so I would...
The research problem in the study I've done is, it seems that RBI has not only looked the experience of other countries, but also learned lessons from the financial crisis. Corporate governance of banks and other financial institutions is a matter of concern. This is because of this globalization era, where no country is unaffected by the risk of the other countries we have. The present study, in this study, I will be taking an attempt to analyze banking disclosure practices and its compliance with corporate governance norms in foreign banks in India. The key facts of my study, the time period I have taken is from 1st April to 31st March, market, Indian market. Content I have taken is foreign banks. The sample we have taken is the banks which have more than 10 branches in India. Or the foreign banks. All the foreign banks which have more than 10 branches have taken as a content. The number of banks which have is 7. The 7 banks total which came up with as my sample. The reports I have used is corporate governance report and the Basel report. Websites, Indian website, that is the website of the particular bank, Indian website, as well as the global website. Analysis I have used is content analysis and with the help of SPSS tool. This is my sample where the 7 banks are there. All the banks have more than 10 or more than 10 branches. First, the highest being the Standard Chartered Bank and the lowest being the Barclays Bank. Coming up to the norms, as per RBI, all the commercial, the private, public banks have to, are centralized, are done by the RBI only, that is the central bank. It says that not less than 50% of the directors should be Indian national residents in India. Not less than 50% of directors should be executive director. Banks must have a minimum 1/3 of the director be totally independent. Maintain a minimum capital adequacy ratio of 10% of the risk-weighted assets. The director shall conform to the fit and proper criteria as laid down by, these are the certain policy regulations we have. It is available on the RBI site. Banks boards has been asked to lay down, this is something new things which RBI has done, policies in critical areas such as investments, loans, asset liability management and recovery of NPAs. So the RBI has stated some mandatory rules for all these things also. The basic norms we have, banks should have an effective and operating audit committee, nomination committee and the compensation committee. Effective board compensation, shall establish effective capital structure and capital adequacy norms, information related to risk management, establish corporate governance procedures that will serve to enhance shareholder value. This is the main thing, that is the research methodology I've used, that is the content analysis. Content analysis basically is a research technique used in social science where the with objective and quantitatively examines written and oral communication in order to make inferences about values, meanings or understandings be conveyed. In the first stage of content analysis, the various reports, that is corporate governance and other reports, were used for the data collection. Then the data was put up in the SPSS. Each data was coded with the help of SPSS and then ranging tones were given to them. Tones may be very excellently compiled with the norms or positive, less positive, this way. Dimensions and the sub-dimensions. I've taken the 5 main dimensions: board structure, senior management, basic organization structure, accounting policies, mature. Similarly, the subdivisions under this has been given the codes as well. The results as per my study is, the accounting policies has the major disclosure, that is a 27%. And followed by loans and advances. All the broad categories has been summed up, and the basic you can say the disclosure is displayed. This graph shows that what is the actual mean of all these tones we have given. The tones, each tone were given for a particular data, then finally a mean was taken out and displayed here. Whether the suppose the accounting policy shows that it is nearby to positive. It is not very positive, but it is positive. That means the accounting policies compliance according to the norms is around positive and with very positive. Similarly, the highest one is loans and advances. That is 25%, very reaching to excellent position. Okay, so according to this also says that it is not directly related. The more information about accounting policies was there, but it is not as excellent or it is not directly related to it. That is the maximum coverage of each bank is given. That is the highest one taken by the Barclays Bank. That is more than 17%. Okay, and according to it has given a very near to excellent position, excellent tone in it. Similarly, all other banks, the lowest being the Deutsche Bank, which is around 7%, and it is around less positive. In this pie chart shows the actual information taken by various data. That is the Basel report is a major. This report is available quarterly basis. Then we have corporate governance report, which is available yearly basis. That is 19%. Global website of a particular bank, and the homepage, that is a Indian website. These are the sum up of all the data we have done that is 50% of the data shows that it is very positive in tone. That means it is very positive in compliance with the norms stated by RBI and the Basel norms are taken. Followed by positive tone, that is 22%, 17% by the excellent, neutral 5%. Neutral here means I've given a tone neutral to that. Suppose a company has an audit committee. It has just written on their website or on their report that it has an audit committee. It does not say whether the audit committees, what is the actual, who is heading the audit committee, or whether they are very transparent or not. So it's given a neutral tone to it. Senior management compensation and qualification is least disclosed by foreign banks in India. Senior management includes the CEO and all. Most of the banks follow Basel II norms, which are disclosed as Basel report on their websites. The 50% of information disclosed by foreign banks is very positive in tone. That means comply with corporate governance norms. The share of bank disclosure is not according to the number of branches opened up. That means the Barclays